Hello and welcome to HarperCollins Presents. I'm Simon Toyne and today I'm talking to Mark Billingham, multi-award winning author of 15 books, including the hugely successful Tom Thorne novels. Also Tom Rob Smith, equally award-laden, author of 4 novels, including one of the all-time great debuts in many people's opinion, including my own, Child 44. Tom is also a screenwriter and has recently created and written a new 5-part BBC drama, London Spy. Welcome both.
Thank you.
It's very nice to have you both here because, in actual fact, when I first became a writer and was making that transition between being a reader to being someone who, you know, was at festivals and being called an author, you were about the first 2 proper, inverted commas, authors I met.
Was it in a bar?
It was on the banks of Lake Geneva, and it was in Tuscany.
You make it sound all incredibly
exactly.
It does sound wonderful.
It does. But that's true. And the thing was, it was that thing of I'd read your books and sort of was a fan, and then all of a sudden I'm sort of a peer, which was weird.
It happens really quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really quickly.
Can you remember back to when you made that same transition from reader to writer, and was there like with me, it was sort of doing that thing and seeing you walking in and going, that's Mark Billingham?
Oh God, absolutely I can. Because I used to hang around at festivals. I went to a couple of festivals while I was still a reader. I'd entered a couple of crime writing competitions and stuff like that, and I was hanging around and sitting at the sort of gala dinners on the Saturday night and looking around going, oh, there's so-and-so and there's so-and-so. And I remember once walking past John Harvey in the street, and he was a big hero of mine, and actually not being brave enough to actually speak to him in the street because he'd think I was a kind of nutter. But what you say is true in that you only have to talk to a couple of people and then you have your first book out, and then suddenly it's a very welcoming gang, I think, without going down that whole cliche thing of how writers, and especially crime writers, are extremely collegiate and welcoming. But they kind of are, and they certainly were with me. Were they welcoming? You were looking at me like...
You're like going, well, this is my story. I got beaten up.
No, but my story was just much more, the moment was much more weirdly less people and more about fonts, which was, I'd written a ton of stuff that was always processed on my computer, and I was always using a kind of crappy Times font. And then suddenly you send it off to a publisher and it comes back and it's beautifully, laid out. And that was the moment where suddenly I was like, this is different to all the other
fonts.
It was
I was
all
like,
about the fonts.
It's all about your people font, sort of very revealing.
Because I have a thing that, like, even though we're all published authors and we, have deals and got books out there and all that kind of stuff, it still kind of feels, every time you sit down to write a book, it does feel a bit like that first time again. For me, I don't know, 15
Absolutely.
books in.
If anything, it feels much worse than that first time, because that first time you're not writing it for anybody. You don't really imagine that you're going to get published. It's, so there's a lot of freedom that goes with writing that first book. Once you're being paid for it and it's your job, it's a different thing. And the second book is harder than the first, and the third is harder than the second. And it took a long time for me to get used to that until a lot of well-established authors said to me, it's meant to be like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't get easier. And that isn't a lament, i.e., I wish it was easy.
No, I know, and that's the thing, isn't it? Is we go to kind of, literary events and various things, and you're aware that there's a load of people there who would give their right arm to be you or be in your situation. On the one hand, it's a brilliant job, and we are blessed, and we're really lucky that we have managed to kind of land on our feet. And I think, there is a part of the fear comes from an honesty, doesn't it? Of feeling that you need to kind of like earn your position there and keep your position there.
Well, also because, there's such a phenomenal amount of luck involved. Whenever you're talking at sort of craft workshops or, for new writers, and, they essentially are asking you how to get published. And the only things you can say are work hard and be lucky. Because, we all know quite a lot of writers, I'm sure each of us, who've never really had that bit of luck, who've never had a break, who've never had enough money spent on them, who've never even got a publishing deal, who can write us under the table. I personally know
totally, yeah.
And it's the same in music or in acting or in any other creative profession. You need that little bit of luck. Your manuscript needs to land on the right desk at the right moment, just when somebody's going, oh, I'm just looking for a new young British thriller writer or whatever it might be.
If I look over the course of all the things I've written, and this includes screenplays and TV stuff, the stuff that hasn't worked, hasn't got made or wasn't as good as anything else, I knew on some level I could feel it at the time. It was at 70 or 80%, and I thought maybe I'll get lucky and it will happen, and it never, ever, ever does. And it's the stuff where I've been like, this really matters, I've really worked at this, that has always worked. There's absolutely no exceptions to that rule in my career. And so that makes me sort of think it's not just luck. Just because of not any other people, I'm sure the people have been unlucky, but just in terms of the stuff I've written, the ones that haven't made it are the ones where I look back and think, well, maybe there was a reason for that.
we always get asked the question, where'd you get your ideas from, which is the wrong question, because ideas 10 a penny. It's what you do with them. Do you have like a file? Do you do that? You say you run out your ideas early on. Are you collecting stuff?
No, and I'm always deeply envious of writers who say they've got the next 3 or 4 books lined up, or whatever it might be, or have a drawer full of things they haven't written yet. Something always tends to turn up in a kind of Mr. McCawberish sort of way. That I've just finished a book, and I know already there's that voice in my head going, really, there should be the germ of an idea for the next one, and there isn't really, but something will happen. It's normally a couple of things coming together. A character that you think of and some weird other thing kind of clashing together, and I don't know what that's going to be yet, but usually something turns up.
Because you're 13 books in now, Thorne.
With Thorne, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen you talk about it, but the standalones, I think, are part and parcel of keeping that freshness, aren't they? Because
I sort of before I knew it, I'd written, I think, 5 Thorne novels on the trot. And one of the writers I'm a big fan of, Michael Connolly, I'd been reading the Bosch books and noticed that he and in fact his breakthrough book, certainly over here, was a standalone novel called The Poet.
Poet, yeah.
And I started to think, and I think I saw him say in an interview something similar, with, about keeping a series fresh by taking a break and walking away from it, even though it's actually still part of the same fictional world, just leaving Bosch to one side and doing something else. So that's what I did, and I've done it 3 times now, because the book I've just finished is a standalone, and it's kind of impossible not to be excited by those in a way you'll not necessarily buy the 14th Thorne novel. You try to do something different with the character if it's another Thorne novel, but it's still essentially, there's going to be Thorne, there's going to be Hendrix, this is going to happen, that kind of conversation is going to be happen, and you know that if you don't put them in there, you're going to get readers complaining about the fact that it's like going to see a band and the last thing you want to hear them say is, here's some tracks from our new album. It's kind of, where's the hits? And I'm aware of that. I'm well aware of that, and I'm aware of that as a reader, actually, almost as a reader of my own work. It's something I found quite hard to explain. But as I write, I'm also reading. If you know what I mean, it's kind of an odd thing. I am the reader, reading what I write, and obviously we all are, because of course the words appearing in front of us and you've got to read them. But I try and put myself in the head of a reader, and because I read a lot of crime, not as much as I did, but I certainly used to read a heck of a lot, I think that makes me quite good at knowing what readers are going to think.
It's such a great skill to be able to pull back and say, if I would just pick this up off a shelf and I was flicking through, what do I make of this? And I remember doing it when you said with other careers. I started off in TV as my first paid job as a writer, and it was looking at it and thinking, actually, this, we have an ad break in the middle of this not very good soap, but we have to pull people back. They're going to have 3 minutes of awful ads for washing up liquid. We have to have this mini hook, and if you work in TV, you would have, that's sort of known by everyone, but I'd never thought about it before. I'd studied English literature, I'd read whatever books, and I'd never thought there is a mini hook before the adverts. It just never cropped into I just never thought about it. And then suddenly I was like, okay, that's important, actually. that's, I'm not aware of all these mechanics, but they make a difference.
Like Lee Child has the same background in television as well, almost identical to mine. We both worked in British commercial television until aged 40 and then wrote a book. And actually, you can see, I totally can see all of that. It was a brilliant apprenticeship for me because of exactly those things. I read somewhere that Raymond Chandler used to write on deliberately small pieces of paper, and something had to happen on each side of paper. So not the A4, it was like he'd have small bits, and he'd go, and he was getting to the bottom, nothing had happened, something had have to happen.
Well, it's that brilliant, so simple yet so profound piece of Elmore Leonard advice, which is try to avoid the parts readers tend to skip. And as you're writing, you know what they are. You do know what they are. I mean, when I was doing stand-up, you know instantly if something has worked, or more often if it hasn't worked, you certainly know. The sound of tumbleweed in a big comedy club is not something you forget. But obviously when you're writing, you're completely removed from that. I have to imagine my audience as the thing is taking shape. And I know that reader is going, move on, there's nothing happening here, or, that character's not doing the things that they should be doing, or that, and it's doing that. It is pace, but it's also, I think, about learning the things you're good at. I think that's something that took me a while to figure out, is that, do you know what, that's my strength, that really isn't.
And do you have a cut-off? I mean, what's your process? Do you sort of go, right, I'm going to spend a certain amount of time on this and then it's done? Are you sort of hours in front of the computer, kind of words per day? How does it work?
Well, it's interesting when you have a contract that's in ahead. In a sense, you don't have the luxury of.
You do the sums, don't you? You go, that's when I deliver it. This is how many days there are left.
Yeah.
That's how many words I need to write.
You're really up against it, and that's why actually I've changed it now so that I don't have any deadlines, which means I don't have any contracts in advance.
You were saying before you've just ripped up your contracts.
So I'm really off contract now.
And so your new thing as well is you back to kind of what you started off, which is screenplays. Why did you have that idea and go screenplay or TV series rather than novel?
Yeah, so the London Spy was it was definitely a first-person narrative. I mean, the character of Danny, played by Ben Whishaw in the show, is in every single scene. And if it was a book, it would clearly be a first-person narrative. Except the character is someone who would never write down a book. He would never. He just wouldn't. He's this person who. So you just think, well, then it's impossible to write it as a book because instantly it becomes artificial because this person would never be writing the story that he's telling. So it had to be told visually, and then it was never going to be a film because it's longer and it just didn't have a film structure. So it kind of landed in television by that sense. And then I had been asked to think about this idea, which in the end didn't go anywhere, and they said to me, Working Title said to me, do you have ideas of your own? And I said, well, there's this story I've been thinking about, how about this? And that was how it came about. And then it sort of took me by surprise. It was on the side. I hadn't written original TV, and then suddenly it got commissioned, and then suddenly it got this cast. It kind of crept up on me a little bit.
You've been together 8 months.
I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him.
I love you.
Alex?
Do you know this man?
People lie, Danny.
You frighten me.
Occasionally, it's right to be afraid.
I don't know what went on in that attic. Neither do you.
Get as far away from these people as you can.
A new 5-part thriller, London Spy, on BBC Two and BBC Two HD.
And are you done with that now? Is it self-contained, or will it be one of those things where they'll see how the ratings are when it comes out? Because it comes out in autumn.
It does have an ending which could go on, but it was never conceived of in that way. And I do think, it would be a little bit like lots of people love it, therefore let's
think of other things to do.
And I think when you've got
that can be very dangerous,
Ben Whishaw, and the cast is really amazing. I think you're going to go back to them. You have to say, I can do something that is as good. And if I could say that honestly, as opposed to slightly deludedly, I would be fine. And if it was even 85%, then I wouldn't at all. I just think, let's come up with something else.
Your fourth book, The Farm, is almost entirely character driven. It's all about these characters in a room, and the thriller events as such, are related rather than shown. And it's more about, it's that thing of the main character's there wondering if his mum's mad or not, based on what she says, and checking it out. And it's very small, but it's also horrible because you can relate to it.
I felt duped, if I'm honest with you. I was duped. I buy a book called The Farm. I'm expecting,
There was a farm in it.
There was a farm in it, but I'm still
as honest as it gets.
And it was in Sweden as well.
A sort of slightly Scandinavian version of The Archers. I wanted some fates and tractors and animals. There's not enough, pigs and stuff.
There was a tractor.
There's
a big farm.
There's a gingham. Nobody's wearing gingham.
There's plenty of farm stuff.
I've seen your one-star review.
Yeah,
I
saw that. Not enough pigs.
Not enough pigs. 1 star.
Exactly.
But seriously,
it's weird. I mean, I won't reference the film because I'll sound really pretentious. But there is this really brilliant Swedish film, with these 2 women on. I'm going to give it away now. But anyway, 2 women on an island, and this very psychological. And there's this scene where one of the characters breaks a glass on the lawn. It's during the summer. And she's picking up the glass, and she just decides to leave a tiny fragment of glass in the grass. And she sits down, and the other character comes out and is walking around, unaware of this shard of glass. I actually saw it and then read the screenplay, and even reading the screenplay, it was so tense. You're waiting for this person. Is she going to step on the glass or not? And there's no huge consequence to this. She's not going to die. She's going to get a cut on her foot. But you're totally enthralled. And
Might go septic.
Might go septic. It might go septic. But it's really, and it was a kind of magic to it. And I thought, what is this about? There is this energy that had she taken out a gun and put it to her head, it would have had nothing. literally nothing. Or maybe it would have had something, but it didn't have anywhere near the same kind of energy as that. It's very hard to unpick it. I think there is a kind of magic to that kind of writing.
But also, presumably, that would say a lot about those characters, about why she leaves it there and is watching, probably enjoying, waiting for that moment.
No, it is all about the characters and filling that setup with meaning that's to do with the relationship between these two.
But The Farm does have a brilliant hook at the heart of it. I mean, I remember you telling me sort of what the story of the book was, sitting in the back of a cab somewhere, and just knowing it was going to be fantastic. I mean, it's not action, it's more like the kind of thing you've just described, with sort of dread and paranoia and who's telling the truth and all that kind of stuff. There's no, nobody's running about getting shot or car chases or anything. You pitched it in the back of a taxi in a couple of minutes. Do you know what I mean? You absolutely did sell it. It does have a very strong hook at the centre of it.
It definitely does. I mean, I think in some ways, when you're struggling on page whatever it is, 120, you can go back to that and think, that's the energy that put me into this story, and I will fix this problem now because I have that. And I think if you don't have that at the beginning and you get to your problem on page 120, which you will inevitably get to, and you start going back thinking, what was the thing that made me really want to write? If you don't have it, then, I'm sure you can dig yourself out of the hole, but it's nice to go back to the energy and think, well, that's the thing that's driving me.
So just here's a question. Do either of you casturbate? Do you know what that is?
Is it thinking about who would play your parts?
Exactly, yeah. It's what you do. It's the kind of imaginary casting of a movie as you're writing it.
I used to do a fun kind of casturbation, which was to casturbate but only being able to use carry-on stars. So, it's Sid James as Thorne and Charles Hawtrey as Hendrix and Barbara Windsor.
That's not bad, though. I like that.
You've got to give yourself limitations. But what I do is change constantly if I see somebody brilliant in something. I'll watch somebody and just go, oh my God, that is, and instantly I want that person to do it. Because it's rarely about looks.
Yeah,
it's you just go, oh my God, that actor, I've never seen that actor before, and they're just astonishing.
And they'll pull it in a different direction, and it will become their thing.
Have you castubated over Solomon Creed?
I do casturbate quite a lot.
I can't believe I said that out loud.
Yeah. There you go. No, I always have a character document, and so as part of my thing, I will cast it. I will sort of, right from the beginning, I'll sort of, say who they are and do a couple of line description, and then look for a photo that will just kind of pin it to the page. And as you say, it changes anyway. It's not like that's what it's going to be. And it's often someone, so Solomon started life as Peter O'Toole in Lawrence of Arabia, not in anything else. Then he became David Bowie in The Man Who Fell to Earth. So you see, it's changed. Then he became Michael Fassbender after I'd seen Shame.
Okay.
And then he,
Ross Kemp.
Then he became someone else. In the end, it never went the Ross Kemp route.
Never went down Kemp.
No, that was that would have been a bad draft if he'd gone Kemp. Really, that would have been.
Editor's note. Creed's gone a bit Kemp.
He's gone totally Kemp. You need to sort that out. Okay, that's it. That's all we have time for. Thank you very much to Tom and Mark. If you want to know anything more about them or their books or anything we've talked about, the links are underneath this clip. This has been HarperCollins Presents. I've been Simon Toyne. Thank you very much.